Anne-Marie, and today I'm joined by Nadia Essex, who is best known for being one of the original hosts of Celebs Go Dating. Since then, she's written, well, a couple of books, one on dating, and she's co-written another around fibroids and how to live healthily with fibroids. And she also is the founder of Kidfluence app, and she's also a mother. So, been very busy since your Celebs Go Dating days.
Oh yeah.
So I'd just like to take you back to, say, maybe 2014, before Celebs Go Dating. What did your life look like then?
Oh gosh. Okay, jumping straight in. 2014. Oh my goodness, I've got mum brain, so I can't even remember yesterday. What was I doing in 2014? Well, I definitely was working a corporate job. I know that for a fact. I couldn't place where. Gosh. Um, I think it was on Oxford Street. I think I was working for a company from it was like owned by James Calm from Dragon's Den. I'm sure it was Prior and Partners, and basically, I was the office manager, the sales manager, um, working a very standard corporate salesy job, managing lots of crazy actors who came in because actors are really good salespeople. So we just had a bunch of like degenerates and crazy people working for us, not in a bad way, in a like fantastic. They're completely bonkers, and that's what it took to sell what we were selling. Um, and yeah, so just I think lived. I want to say I lived in Soho, lived in Central, was single, me and my dog childless, living a very, very nice but unfulfilled life.
And so, how did you get involved with Celebs Go Dating? Was there an audition process, or were you headhunted? How did that come to being?
Both. They called me sort of completely out of the blue. I remember I was changing the sheets on my bed at the time, which was really random. You know how things just stick in your head. And I got a call from a woman just being like, "We're casting for a new TV show. We're looking for dating experts. Do you want to come and screen test?" And I was like, "Yeah, that sounds amazing." So went and did the screen test. I think they said they were going to do two screen tests and make a decision. And then I ended up, I think I did seven screen tests in the end, because they couldn't decide between me and one or two other people, I think it was. So yeah, they were just couldn't make up their mind. And then I think I officially got the job the day before we started filming it. Again, it was back and forward. And then about 4 o'clock the day before we started, they called me and was like, "Okay, yeah, you got it. The car will pick you up at 5 o'clock tomorrow morning." And I was like, "Okay."
Thrown into the deep end then.
Yeah, big time, big time.
How was your experience on the show?
It was it was fantastic. It was the best of times and the worst of times. It literally couldn't that literally sums it up. We had such high highs and such low lows. The the fact that the show had never been made before, I think was a good and a bad thing, because certainly for the first month, none of us knew what we were doing. Like literally nobody. And because we didn't have a format that we'd ever worked from before, every single person was like, does that work? Should we try that? Should we do this? So it was a very different series one to I when five say, very different. It was just the different things they try, there's lots of trial and error going on. But it was lovely, and I got to work with some great people, and it was like long days. We were doing like we'd easily do a 14-hour day, but it doesn't feel long when you're doing something you love. And I really did love. I loved all of the television side. I loved the being in front of camera and like performing and doing my thing, but I also loved the behind the scenes, the editing. I used to have to go in and do maybe like a voice pickup, so I'd go into Soho and do like voiceover for stuff that if the mic didn't quite pick it up, you have to go and re-say the lines. And all of the behind the scenes stuff I really enjoyed as well. I just enjoyed the whole process of like making a TV show from sort of start, and then once it gets on telly, that process.
Okay. And I did see a couple of podcasts you've done where, for disclosure for those people who are watching, I know Nadia because I employed her as a love coach at one point, and at the time I remember thinking, bet I won't be able to afford her, and I was surprised that I could afford you at the time. And I think if you just share to me, were there issues with your high-end clients were put off by you doing reality TV?
Yes, massively. So when I started doing dating coaching, I left my corporate job and then didn't know, sorry, what I wanted to do. And I was going to take a year sabbatical. I was like, I've got the money in the bank. I'm just going to, really decide what I want. And I tried a few different things. At one point, I wanted to open a nursery, and then I was going to open a concierge service. And it was only my ex-boss at the time who had just gone through a divorce, and I'd moved to the King's Road in Chelsea, and she was like, can you help me? I want to start dating again. So we used to go out as like a twosome, and I helped her start dating, and I just found that it was something I really enjoyed. I really enjoyed that wing woman, coaching her, helping her spot the red flags, helping her dodge the bullets, giving her confidence to go up and like speak to a guy. I really enjoyed that process. And then eventually she ended up meeting a man that she ended up going on to marry. And it kind of just evolved into a business. And I thought, okay, let me charge. And obviously living on the King's Road, you can charge, I think my standard rate was something like £500 an hour, because I could do that because I lived on the King's Road. It was really, really high-end women. We were going to high-end places. We were meeting high-end men. And my advice was sound. And so it was like, it was worth it. But as soon as I went on telly and did like a reality show, none of them wanted to be seen with me or associated with me. They it's a very sort of cliquey reality TV, especially back then. Remember, this was like 2016-ish. The world was a very different place. Very, very different. If you think of all the things that have happened since 2016, not just things like the pandemic, but things like, Caroline Flack's passed away, Epstein and Donald Trump, and like the world is so different to how it was back then. And so it was interesting. It was a really interesting time, because I literally had to make a decision to sort of keep flogging a dead horse, as it were, and keep my prices high and keep going and keep pushing through for one or two clients that might come through, or start again. And that's what I decided to do. I was just like, right, let me start again. I remade a whole new website with a whole new pricing, and I thought, let me just make it more affordable for like viewers of the show, because ultimately that's gonna be my market now. So it was a tough one because I had to do 2-3 times more work for the same amount of money. So that was tough to like take that on the chin and be like, I'm gonna have to work harder for the same. But at the same time, I was like, but I get this opportunity to like do this TV show and be part of something that hopefully is amazing. And so it was tough, but it was definitely the right choice, I think, at the time, because I didn't want to be, I wanted to help people. So I didn't want to outprice myself so much that I could only help, really, really super privileged people. So yeah, I did it.
And you've also talked about people assumed because you were on television you were earning loads of money and you were barely making the minimum wage. Is that correct?
Yeah, definitely weren't making minimum wage. Anybody that sees you on telly thinks that you're rich. And I think because it's glamorized, you see people on telly, and a lot of people like movie stars are rich. So that makes sense. But when it comes to reality TV, it's very much not the case. I think my first paycheck for Celebs Go Dating was like £5,000, and that was for 3 months' work. And then you take away 20% agent fees, I think 20% tax, national insurance. That you're left with very, very little, but you're doing 14 hours a day, at least 5 days a week. There was no other time to, I was working full-time hours but getting less than part-time wage. So that was really, really difficult as well, that we just weren't compensated in any way fairly.
And when you left Celebs Go Dating, how was that? I know you've spoken about how your mental health was impacted while you were on Celebs Go Dating. You didn't feel like you were getting the necessary support.
Yeah, well, again, it was a very different time. There was no duty of care, there was no mental health support, there was no support. I didn't feel supported in any way, really. Yeah, it was almost like nobody's, because nobody was kind of, it was nobody's job. Everyone was really busy and overworked and underpaid, and so nobody had the time to take on the extra responsibility of like dealing with mental health problems or helping people with mental health. And yeah, it was a really tough time. And I think because, I left the show around a scandal that really wasn't my making. It was one of those situations where I'd been plucked off the street, I'd been put on television, I had, thousands of people messaging me a day, trolling. Like back in those days, trolling was very much like normal because people were just starting to like understand social media and use social media, and so trolling was a standard thing. I'd get 1,000 messages a night calling me fat, ugly, I should die, why don't I kill myself because I'm so disgusting, I'm boring, I'm this, and just abuse. There was a lot of abuse, and I didn't know how to handle that abuse. I wasn't the type of person that could switch off. I felt like I wanted to fight back. Because that has always been in my nature. I grew up with 3 brothers and I was very vocal, and I now know that I've got ADHD, and so I have a real justice sensitivity. And so for me, like arguing my point was important to me. And so it was one of those situations where it's like stories got sold about me, full stories saying I was an internet troll and all this got sold about me. And I wasn't allowed to give my right of reply, I wasn't allowed to comment, I wasn't allowed to give my side of the story across. And I also wasn't protected by a company who I think should have protected me and said, the last time I spoke to them, they said, okay, go home, we're going to do a full independent investigation and then we'll get back to you. And that was the last thing I heard from them. I was like, great, that to me is fair. Like, let's get someone else in, I can tell them my side of the story, and they'll hopefully agree that, okay, I shouldn't be, calling people bitches on Twitter, but it's not the end of the world because I'm defending myself against people that are trolling me. I'm not actively going out being harmful, racist, rude. I'm not picking on people. It's purely a defense mechanism, which is a coping mechanism, which was created by the situation that they had put me in. So I was like, great, that's perfect. And then I went home, and then at 4:00 in the afternoon, I get a call from the press woman saying, the Sun's going to run a story saying you've been suspended and we're going to comment and confirm. And I'm like, what are you, you haven't even told me this. Like, what are you talking about? Like, one, you haven't even told me these details, and this is the first time I'm finding out about it. But second of all, like, what do you mean you're going to confirm? How on earth can I get an independent then investigation into this when you're confirming that basically I've done something wrong? When there hasn't even been an investigation yet? Like, that's just not, it's not fair. That's not right. And they were like, yeah, well, we're going to do it anyway. And I was like, well, that was that. And then that story came out. And then the next day, Eden sold a story about me being an internet troll. And then that was it after that. And I was told specifically, do not talk, don't reply to that story, don't say anything back, just leave it type thing. And I was like, well, it's not fair. Like, this is being, the tweets are being edited out of context, so it looks bad, like I'm an internet troll, but as soon as you see the context, you're like, no, I'm just defending myself, which is what I said from the first place. And again, they were like, no, we're still no right of reply. And I was like, and so all this kind of happened, and I was very much felt unable to kind of speak out about it. Felt very unsupported because I was like, well, I can't, there's no chance of me now getting an independent investigation. The whole bloody world knows, it's like I'm trending on BBC World because I've been, basically it's now moved to being sacked for trolling. And it's like, that hasn't happened. And so it was a really tough time because not only was it tough because anyone going through that situation would have found it tough, but it wasn't true. And I think that was the hardest part of like, I don't deserve the fake narrative that's going round that I've been sacked for trolling, because that's just simply not true. And that was one of the hardest things as well, is accepting and dealing with. And I had to work really hard with a therapist for like 3 years. I had intensive therapy to try and be okay with the fact that even today people will still say, oh, you got sacked for trolling. And I have to be okay with that. I have to be okay that people are getting it wrong, and they believe that, but they believe that just because they've seen a headline or they've seen something, they're not quite sure, but they've seen something. It's not their fault. There was all this fakeness around it. There was a narrative being pushed. People wanted this, to be me, even though it wasn't. And I have to be okay with people believing false things about me.
So, what do you think was the catalyst for Eden selling that story then? Why do you think he did that?
I don't know. I honestly don't know. I don't think it's any secret that we didn't get on. And I think that I can't tell you. You'd have to ask him. I mean, I'm sure he's got a perfectly good explanation for why he sold that story. But I couldn't answer for him. I just, at the time, I felt like there was a real vendetta. And there's still been stories since he sold about me that are very, very damaging and very, very, like, mean. And, it's one of those things where I can't speak for him. I can just tell you, how it made me feel. And it's like, it felt very, very much like it was a vendetta against me. And again, I think with that's why I went to court, because I think that the production company saw that and should have protected me more. That I'm not a horrible, evil person that deserves to be trending on BBC World for a story that isn't true. That's not right. That's not fair. And they could have protected me more if they'd just spoken out a little bit more. If they'd given me the independent investigation, and a chance to really understand what had happened, and then come to an avert. It was just it within the space of a few hours. It was all hunky dory. Go home, and we're going to do an investigation to yours suspended. We're going to confirm it, and we're going to fuel the fire. And I'll never understand why they chose that route of kind of throwing me under the bus instead of, we've put this woman through hell for the past 3 years. Let's give her the benefit of the doubt on this one.
I must admit, it reminds me of experiences I've had where I've had bullying experiences and people seem to side with the bullies because it's easier. It almost seems like that's what's happened with you.
But I don't know. I mean, I can't tell. It's one of those where I would love to be able to get the answers of like, why did they choose to go down that route? Why did they do that? But I don't, again, and I'm sure whoever chose it leveled it in their head the way that they thought was the right way to level it. I'm sure if you asked them, they had a really good reason of like, well, we thought we needed to do this or whatever. People do things and then they make it okay in their own heads, and they create a version of a narrative that makes it okay in their head for what they've done. And so I don't even think if I spoke to them I'd get an answer, because in their head they did what they thought was the right thing. In my head, I think it's quite obvious it couldn't have been worse, the wrong choice, but they seem to think the same. So it's again lots of therapy of like, I can't change what's happened. I may never know why they chose to go down that route and why they chose to, fuel a fire basically, and not hand me a bone, or not all they had to do was even come back and say that I wasn't sacked, for example, and have that on record, or so, I don't know, just something that would have kind of help set the record straight, because obviously at the moment it was me shouting out But then you've got Eden selling a story and the production company commenting on it, both looking like I'm the perpetrator. And it's like that then doesn't change. There's no, it looks as if it's two against one.
Yeah, it's almost like they're totally devoid of empathy or something. Empathy genes are missing.
Maybe I don't know. I think in television there is a very strong embedded mindset of protect the company at all costs, whatever it takes. And again, this was pre Caroline Flack. If what had happened to me had happened after Caroline Flack, it wouldn't have ever happened. Let's just say that. There's no way in the world that the production company would behave the same way with me after Caroline Flack had died. They would have handled it so different. I know they would have done, because they would have had to have done. Because when I was going through what I went through, the words duty of care didn't exist. You didn't hear it because it didn't exist. No one cared. Whereas after Caroline Flack, you can see they put in a lot of processes. They've got a lot more duty of care boxes that they've ticked now to protect their talent and the people they put on telly. It is very, very different. I still think the culture's the same. I still think it's a protect the company at all costs. I still think it's a pull up the oars and screw everyone else if things go belly up. But they are at least trying and at least aware. There is an awareness of, if you go on Love Island, you do have a level of protection now that the first people in Love Island never had. So it is different, and it's just a shame because it's a shame that it took Caroline Flack dying for this to happen, and it's a shame that people couldn't have seen my experience and made those changes. The fact that I was suicidal, I was taken to hospital for being suicidal. I didn't want to be, it's like I was hospitalized, I was put on medication, I was put into therapy. Just because I stayed, nothing really changed. But because she went and that was it, it was like everything changed. And I just think that's really tough that it took a death when actually anyone just has to look at my experience of 2018. It was a similar thing. The whole world, it feels like, but certainly the whole country thinks that you are a person that you're not. The press are desperate to take stories. I mean, I had people from the show from years ago selling stories. People jumped on the bandwagon. Again, edited tweets. People were, I would send a message. I think I sent a message to someone being like, okay. And then they said that they sold that story, so being like, look how rude she is. Like, everybody jumped on that bandwagon because the trend was, I'm a bad person and the stories against me sell. And that was the trend. And it was tough, and it's a shame. It's a shame that it took someone dying and that people couldn't have seen from my experience. Actually, we need to do more because more needed to be done. And it never would have happened if Caroline had died before my experience. They absolutely would have done more for me.
Yeah, and think about that, she was pretty much hounded. I remember, and also I was watching a documentary about Amy Winehouse recently and the way she was treated. The press just were awful to, and it always seemed to be to women as well, didn't it? Never seemed to be
Yeah,
to men.
yeah. I think we're pretty fair game, aren't we, in terms of the press? But again, the press, they're not their remit is not to sell news. Their remit, sorry, is not to give you information anymore. Their remit is to get clicks, to sell advertising space, to make money, and whatever makes them clicks and money, well, they'll post. And also, each newspaper's got their own agenda. You know that the Guardian is left. You're going to see things about Donald Trump in there, painting him out to be a horrible person because it's a left publication. It leans to the left. And then you know that other papers are more right wing. It's like you now, we can see there's a clear divide in the way that the same story is written in two different papers, depending on whether the paper's editor or whoever it is at the top is left or right leaning. And so I think people need to are coming wise to the fact that legacy media now is untrustworthy, because it will print a narrative that suits its agenda about the same situation. And not saying that's wrong, it's just you then have to look at everything through critical eyes, I think, and read a piece. Don't just read a headline as well. That's a mistake that a lot of people make. They read these glossy headlines, and then somewhere in the body of the text will be the actual story of what happened.
Really look past the headline and just sort of react to the headline, don't they?
Exactly.
Talking about sort of happier things, you're now a mother. What's
Yeah.
motherhood like for you?
Um, the best of times and the worst of times. It's fabulous. It is. It is. I how can I explain it? I think it's like, it feels like anyway. Life is imagine you're in a computer game, and that's life, and we're in a computer game and we're on a level. And when I had Zeke, I moved up to the next level. I unlocked the next level. And so I'm going through life now, and it's the same world, it's the same computer game, but I'm now seeing different parts of the world. I'm seeing different things are opening up. Like, my eyes have been open to so many different things. I have been stretched to my, my absolute limits in terms of tiredness, in terms of patience. It's like I'm on a different level of the world now. And I was, you're relearning. It's a very odd experience because I'm relearning the world as me now, which is a very different person 5 years ago, because I had to have been, because you go through so much. I mean, the people talk about sleep deprivation, but it's actually criminal that women are so sleep deprived but yet expected to just carry on. The lack of support is heartbreaking, because there isn't really, if you don't have family support really, or the village that they talk about, you're pretty screwed, because it's 10 times harder. It just is. There's nothing. I've missed out on so many opportunities because I don't have childcare. I've missed out on multiple work things because I don't have childcare. I've had to say no to a lot of great. The other day I got offered like a Virgin Voyager cruise, completely free cruise. I had to say no because I don't have childcare. Work meetings. I missed a meeting last week with my friend. Had dinner with the 15 years editor of Grazia, and I couldn't go. I don't have childcare. It's like it's very, very difficult when you are a single parent and you don't have any childcare to work. It feels like sometimes life would be easier if I just sat on benefits, because it's really, really hard when you're actually trying to work to balance everything.
I mean, there's been a narrative for quite a while that women can have it all, but I don't think that's true, really, is it?
I think you definitely can. You just have to, it's your version of it. Like, I feel like I've got it all. What haven't I got? I've got a lovely house, I've got a lovely son, I've got, my car's broken down, but I will get a new one. Um, but I've got food in the fridge. I've got a great, I love my job, I love my business, I love what I do. Like, I literally have it all. I already have it. It's just, I think people don't sit and think what having it all is. I think people think having it all means, do you remember back in the day when I was growing up, everyone wanted to be a wag. That was, and now kids today would never dream of aspiring to be a wag. But I remember reading a survey when I was younger that more people wanted to be a wag than a nurse. And it was really the beginning of that era of women that were really, really rich, didn't have to work, were shopping and drinking champagne pretty much all day, and looked like they had it all and the perfect life. And I think that we have to then think about what our version of all is. Because if your version of all is being super rich, on a mega yacht, drinking champagne, that's great, and you can get there. But I don't think that's not my version of having it all. My version is being really well rounded, having great experiences, having financial freedom to be able to go on holiday. Whether it's a super yacht or down Butlins, it doesn't matter. You can still do something. having food in the fridge, being safe, spending your days doing something you enjoy, like that to me that's having it all. It's I think people mean having it all as in like winning the lottery. I've seen like 100 millions, and I'm like that is great, but there's plenty of 100 million lottery winners that are miserable.
Yeah, money doesn't buy happiness, does it?
No, I think it does. I absolutely think it does. No, I do. I think money definitely buys happiness for sure. You never see a absolutely skin happy person. Like people in poverty are not happy. They are very, 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 and I find I actually a lot of people say that, and I think we've been really socially conditioned into thinking that it's not true. Believe me, money does buy you happiness because it can buy you nice things. It can buy you security, which if you feel secure, if you know your bills are being paid, you already are less anxious, which already means that your day-to-day life is going to be better. It can buy you a nice holiday. So if you know that next month you're flying to Barbados and you're going to fly first class and you're going to go to the lounge and you're going to have a great day, that is going to make you happy. You're not going to be sad knowing you've got a first class holiday to Barbados next month. It's going to buy you the best food so you can eat organic food. You don't have to eat all the crap that's all the stuff that's in it, and you're going to feel good about yourself because you know you're nourishing your body really, really well. You can buy nice clothes so that when you look in the mirror, you feel good about yourself because you know, hey, I'm looking good today. Like money buys happiness. It absolutely does. And I think we have to get away from this kind of like, I always say that if people that say that money doesn't buy happiness have never been broke. Because believe me, if you've been broke, if you've been like, I've been so broke that I've had to eat out of like a tin of beans, like broke, I'm gonna lose my house, like be homeless, like broke on my bottom. And if somebody had come along and given me 20 quid, I would have burst out into tears with joy. Like money does make us happy because unfortunately money makes the world go round. And we can't fight that. So I'm like, instead of like trying to fight the system, learn the rules, play the game, and win.
So you've moved away from London now. Is that partly a financial consideration as well?
Definitely. I found London, we got to the stage where we were just living okay. All the bills were paid, but at the end of the month, there was nothing left over basically. And it's really boring when you haven't got any. Again, money makes me happy. When you haven't got any fun money at the end of the month, when you haven't got any money to do anything or go anywhere, and when you've got a toddler who wants to do stuff and go somewhere, that is even harder because you can't, especially in the winter, you can't take them to the park, and everything costs money. A soft play, you're looking at 20 quid, and that's for maybe 2 hours if you're lucky. And then you have to do one in the morning, and you have to do one activity in the afternoon. You go, cinema's going to cost you 20, 30 quid. Bowling's going to cost you 15 quid. Everything costs money. And when you don't have, at the end of the month, that like extra money, you've paid your bills, you're good, but you've got no money left over to go to the soft play, to go to the bowling or the park or the arcades. That's not fun. And so I was looking around London and thinking, okay, I could downsize quite easily. But then I was like, then our quality of life would go down. We could easily move into like a 1 bedroom. He's like 2, like not a problem. But then I was like, as he grows older, he needs a space. And, it's one of those things where I just juggled it. If it was up me by myself, I could easily have moved into a studio apartment and been perfectly fine. But it was like, it wasn't just me. And I don't think that I should be I didn't want to live in a 1 bed, sharing a 1 bed with my 2-year-old. As he grows up and he's starting school, I needed to be more realistic about putting down roots. And I had family over in West Sussex, and I was like, okay, let me see what it's like. I can move down for like a year. If I don't like it, I'm not a tree. I haven't planted roots. I can move again. It's not a problem. And I made the decision to move. I didn't want to, but I made the decision to move, and it took me a good few weeks to like come to terms with it. I was really upset. I was like grieving London. I love London. It's my favourite city in the world. I'd been there for 20 years. Like, I always knew growing up that I wanted to live in London. It was like the place that I'd put on this pedestal. And so it took a good few weeks for me to kind of almost stop crying because I was just really, really, really like, I miss London. But then, and I wasn't sure how long it would take me to acclimatise, but 3 months after I'd moved, I went back into London for a meeting. And as I was driving in, I drove through Putney and I saw this family like coming out of the house and they were like obviously getting ready to go to lunch. And I was like, it's like a mum and a dad and a toddler or two children. And I literally, my heart was like, oh, I miss London so much. Like, I want to be getting ready with my family and going to like lunch with the fam. And then, so that was like a pang of like, oh, I miss London. And then when I drove home, by the time I'd finished meetings and then come out of London, on the way home, I was like, get me out of here. Get me gone. And I got through Putney and got out onto like the country road and was like, the endorphins really hit. And I was like, oh, this is good. I'm really happy. And that was the first real moment that I was like, okay, I've made the right choice. And now I'm couldn't be happier. I feel like, if I'm honest, I feel like I've left a cult. I feel like I've left a cult. I feel like when you live in London, you have to convince yourself of certain things to live there because it's an absolute dive. It's the crime, you know. Just the thought of like, you can't walk around in London with your phone in your hand because it gets snatched out of your hand. Like, it just will happen. That is what is guaranteed. Every morning I'd wake up and someone on the group chat would be like, car's gone from the driveway, if you see this number plate, someone, oh, we had a break-in last night. The crime in London is so unbelievably out of control that I didn't realise how unsafe I felt until I came to the countryside and just could feel, you don't notice it, but then when you go back into London, you feel your anxiety rising. You're like, oh, this is different because I'm not living up here. Where I live, I'm living down here. Like, it is just a different level of anxiety when you walk out the door. And so it was that I was like, wow, that in itself is amazing. And then the opportunities, it's one of those, again, like, you really feel like, I live in London. It's absolute BS. It really is. It really felt like I'd left a cult. I felt free. I felt like I could see it clearly for the first time. Like, it wasn't all it's cracked up to be. I wasn't a failure for leaving London. And it absolutely was like the best decision I could have made because we had fun money. So our quality of life went up massively overnight because at the end of the month, we had money left over and we could do loads of fun things. And that was worth it in itself.
So you feel like your mental health is improved by getting out of London then, basically?
Tenfold. I mean, I always thought I was a city girl. I always thought I was like city, bright lights, amazing, like go, 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 go. And then now I live in the country, I'm like, oh my God, I get so much endorphins. Just driving, and then you come around a corner and it opens up to like these rolling hills, and it's like, wow, our country is so beautiful. And it is that gives, as an ADHDer who now realises that my brain is constantly seeking endorphins, that gives me the endorphins. I just driving. Not today because it's all flooded, but on a normal day when you can just get in the car and drive, the scenery is so beautiful that you can't help but just fall in love.
So you talked about ADHD. When did you find out you have ADHD?
So this year, I always thought to myself, life is really difficult and I'm the strongest person I know. So how is other people dealing with life? Because I'm really struggling. And I always wondered, I wonder if there's something wrong with me and there's just like a magic pill that I'm not taking where everybody's like normal and I'm just not. And if I took this pill, then I'd be like, oh. But I never really, you just romanticize like feeling good when things are tough. And it was about 6 months ago, I was with my girlfriend and we went to an event actually in London and we were driving home. We stopped at the services and we were just sitting and we got a Burger King and she was like, we were talking and her daughter's got ADHD. And She was like, do you have any sensory issues? And I was like, no, I don't have ADHD, because I was like, I don't align with anyone. Like, I'll see someone that says I've got ADHD and I'm like, well, I can't have it because I'm not like them. And then I'll be like, I'm not like her, so I can't have it. Like, I'm not, my personality and her personality are completely different. Like, we can't have the same condition because I don't align myself with her. We're totally different people. And so she said, have you got any sensory issues? And I was like, no. And she was like, oh, okay. And then she started talking about her daughter's sensory issues. And she was like, oh, yeah, well, she's really sensitive to, like, light. And I was like, oh, yeah, no, I have to wear sunglasses, like, all the time. Even in, like, just bright rooms. It hurts my eyes. She's like, oh, yeah, she's really sensitive to, like, noise and repetitiveness and just, like, listed all these things. And I was like, oh, my God, yeah, me too. Oh, yeah, me too. Oh, yeah, me too. And that was like a light bulb moment of, okay, maybe I do have sensory issues, first of all, because I was just very much like, no, but actually I do. Oh, thumbs up. I don't know why that came up. And so maybe I do have sensory issues. And then I tried to get a referral on the NHS. I've been refused twice. So they rejected me, saying they haven't got enough information. And I'm like, I filled in the form that you sent me. If that form doesn't have enough information, then that's a you problem, surely. But anyway, they're not very good when it comes to that. So I've got my right to refer. There's something called right to refer. So if they reject you, you can choose where to be referred. So I spoke to a company last week about referring to them. And then I also got an ADHD coach. There's coaches out there that specifically deal with, like, ADHD coaching. And we did 4 sessions. I've done 4 sessions with her. And on the first session, she said to me, it was something like, self-diagnosis with ADHD is just as valid, because people that don't think they have ADHD don't have it. And the people that think they do have it have got it. Like, you don't think you've got ADHD if you haven't got it. And so she was like, the fact that you think you've got it, you've got it. It's just that simple. You're hitting all the markers. You're ticking all the boxes. You've got it. You know that. And if you think you have, you have. So she was really good at helping me, like, accept the diagnosis, because I think that was really difficult as well, like, accepting. Which sounds strange because I wanted a diagnosis, but then it's really weird accepting it. And then you go through the motions of feeling really, I spent like probably about a week feeling really angry and resentful, because it's one of those where you think to yourself, I'm 42 years old. I've had, and you look back at your childhood and go, it makes so much sense. And if only someone had picked up on it when I was a child. My life has been very difficult. I found life really hard. I've really struggled with life. And so it would have been so different if someone had, in my childhood, had picked it up and helped support me in some way. Life could have been very difficult, and I perhaps would have understood myself better, and been kinder to myself, because it's not a me problem. It's a chemical in my brain. And then you go through the whole, like, it's a real roller coaster. So you have, like, it's the stages, almost like the stages of grief. You know, you go through being, like, really relieved that you've got, you've diagnosis, or you feel good because you've got, like, somebody affirming that, yes, this is something wrong with you. Then it's the kind of, like, resentful anger of, like, oh, so many missed, wasted years. And then you get teary because you're like, oh, the old me, the poor me, she struggled so much, she didn't have a clue. And then you kind of come out the other side and like, right, okay, now I know about it. Now perhaps we can do something with that information. So there is a real, like, roller coaster of emotions you go through, because it is a big deal when you get to my age and you realise that all along you've had a proper, like, chemical imbalance in your brain that has been misdiagnosed as anxiety, that has been looked over, that has been passed over, that has been denied for your whole life. It's difficult to be okay with that.
So has it changed the way you deal with things now, or is it just a case of being more aware?
Definitely changed the way I deal with things, but most importantly, the way I deal with myself. Because I'm so much kinder to myself. Because I understand myself more. So when I'm looking for things like a dopamine hit, I'll know that it's not just me being, like, greedy because I want that donut. It's because I'm depleted in dopamine and my body wants that donut because it knows it's going to get a dopamine hit. So it's almost like I can disassociate myself from it, and so I can be kinder to myself. Because before I'd be not very kind to myself. I'd want a donut and I'd want a donut and I'd be like, don't have a donut because you're going to, you're not going to, you shouldn't have a donut. You're trying to cut your calories today. And then I'd be like, no, but I really want a donut. Really, really, really want a donut. And so I could spend like all day arguing with myself in my head about having this bloody donut, to the point where at the end I'd be like, okay, I'm going to have the donut, and then I have the donut, and then I shame myself, being like, see, you've got no willpower, you can't do it, you can't keep anything, you said you were going to cut your calories and you didn't do it. I have a constant narrative going in my head. I usually have 2 voices, but sometimes I can have 3 voices in my head all talking to each other at the same time about the narrative of what's going on. Like, my brain is never quiet, ever, ever, ever. I also have tinnitus as well, so even if my brain is quiet, I've got a ringing in my ears. So I'm constantly fatigued. I'm very, very, very emotionally fatigued a lot of the time. I often go into fight or flight responses if things feel really overwhelming. Like, I understand myself so much better, so that if I'm going into a freeze response because everything's overwhelming, I know that will pass, and I know now to just take a moment, however long it takes, go and make a cup of tea, tiny baby chunks, make a cup of tea. That's the baby chunk, and then chill, and it will pass. And it's okay that you're in a freeze response. That's your body is in survival. That's your body reacting. It's not you. You're not making a choice to be lazy. You're not making a choice to procrastinate. You're not making a choice not to read that email or not to open your post. It's not choices you're making. It's actually proven that function in your brain runs on dopamine, and because my body burns through dopamine a lot quicker than other people's, that part in my brain just doesn't function. And so it's not a choice. I'm not choosing to be a lazy bum. My brain, the part of my brain that gives me the get up and go, isn't working. So it's quite like refreshing to be like, okay, that makes sense, and not beat yourself up for things that you think are your choices, and actually it's not, it's your brain.
And are you taking any medication for that, or are you just managing it?
No, I'm just managing it at the moment through diet, exercise, meditation. I may consider medication because it goes through cycles. Some days, not days, some months really, really difficult, some months really, really easy. Not easy, but easier. And I'm going to see how I can get on without medication, but I'm definitely not adverse to taking medication, because when my brain is burning through dopamine so quickly and I'm desperately trying to get it, it's like shopping, eating, drinking alcohol. Like, my body defaults to those things when I'm really depleted, and so it's very, very difficult, because obviously those things then make you feel crap. They don't make you feel very good, so it's not off the table, because when I'm going through that kind of like spiral, then it would be good to have medication that could just level you out a little bit. But I haven't even got a formal diagnosis yet, so I think it's going to be a few years before I'd even be allowed medication, because apparently it takes that long you have to get a diagnosis, and then once you get a diagnosis, they then have to refer you onto another list for treatment, and that could be, well, the girl I did a photo shoot last week, and she's been waiting 2 years on the medication referral list. So we'll see.
Talking about looking after yourself naturally, I know you've recently released a book co-authored around fibroids, and would you like to talk about that a bit?
Yeah, I suffered from fibroids. I believe it's from my C-section, because I didn't have them before I had a baby. The GP won't confirm or deny that, but I'm like, well, it makes sense. And they were debilitating and terrible. And then in January this year, I was like, I can't live like this anymore. I don't want to go on medication. I don't want to go back on birth control. I think that women have no idea how dangerous birth control is. Like, I think if people are moaning about like the dangers in like the vaccine, for example, but yet taking birth control, I'm like, you have no idea how dangerous birth control is. It's really, really dangerous. And so I didn't want to go back on medication for that. And I did a lot of research, and I was like, that you can heal your fibroids naturally. You can, because there's people out there that have done it. And so I just did loads of research, loads of trial and error, changed my lifestyle dramatically, small changes, but over a long period of time. And 9 months later, I think it was, I had a scan, and I'd shrunk. One completely disappeared, and the other two had shrunk by over half. So I definitely, am an advocate for change your life and change your life. And my friend Naomi was in the same boat. She had a 10 centimetre fibroid that she could actually feel. If she pressed in her tummy, you could actually feel it. It was that big. And they told her her only option was a hysterectomy. And she was like, I'm not ready to do that. And like, at this point, I think she was in her late 30s. She was like, I'm not ready. I'm not saying I want children, but I'm not ready for a hysterectomy. That's a major surgery. Like, taking out her whole womb. Like, wow. So she was the same, and she went on like a separate journey to heal her fibroids, which she has done. Hers, again, through lifestyle only, no medication. Hers has shrunk to now, I think, 2 centimetres she's at. And we came together and were just talking about it, and we was like, this is so important that we've both done it, and we've both done it through lifestyle. Let's make it accessible to people, and kind of put it pen to paper and write almost like a how-to of what we did. So we wrote Fibro Free, and just a little guide really on how to heal your fibroids naturally, just with all the lifestyle tips we did, all the changes we made, her story, my story, and yeah, it's available on Amazon. Little plug.
And you've also got a book that you did, 101 Tip for Dating After the Pandemic. That you can get on
Yeah.
Kindle as well. I downloaded it onto Kindle, so
Yeah. It's I think, with that book now, it's the pandemic's well over. That was a very much like of its time, because I talked about dating etiquette around masks and things like that. So it probably isn't relevant for people now. But at the time it was just important to me that especially coming out the back of, like, I think, how many lockdowns we have, 3 lockdowns, dating was changed massively, and people were really coming to me a lot at that time about, what do I do? I'm scared. And so again, I just thought, let me put pen to paper and answer people's Instagram questions, but in like a book format. So yeah, wrote that book, and again published it on Amazon, and yeah, it was really, really popular. It was really good, and I think people found it really helpful at that scary time when they didn't know what to do. But obviously life now is, I would say, back to normal-ish. Still can't get a GP appointment for love nor money, but yeah, I think it's but it was something I was really proud of, because I did that, and I I didn't know what I was doing, and it was all me, and I wrote the whole thing, and I self-published, and I didn't know how to do that, and so yeah, I was really proud that I did it.
I do think there are tips there that do still resonate, though. There's one that I came across, which was, if you are of faith, to be honest with your date about that, so that there's sort of no surprises. And the reason that resonated with me was, I'm Catholic, and I was dating somebody who didn't like the fact I was Catholic, to the point where I actually asked him once, if you'd known I was Catholic before you asked me out, would you have asked me out? And he says, probably not, no. And I ended up with him for 6 years. So
Oh wow. Wow.
So yeah, there are certainly certain things that do still resonate. Obviously, the
Yeah.
mask stuff not so much, but yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And it is one of those things where I try to put in as just like as much as much dating info as possible, because I feel like that's pretty much, my whole ethos. And even with now doing Kidfluence, so I've got like it's called Kidfluence, and it's a parent influencer app. And so basically, if you're a content creator, you can go on the app, and businesses will be on there for collaborations for you, so that you can make content for them. And all the businesses are vetted, so it's all like 100% genuine. But again, the point of me doing that was to try and create community and to make parents' lives easier, because I found parenting really difficult. I had a baby. 10 days later, we went into lockdown. I was a single parent. I lived, on the second floor. I had an emergency C-section. Nobody was allowed in my house. There were no midwife appointments, no checkups, no nothing. And it was the really, really, really difficult time. I never understood how I did it, but I did, thank goodness. And it was really, really tough. And I never want anybody to go through that. And so I feel like all my life, I've always done things that are very community based or have a community at the heart of them. I believe in putting the ladder down and helping people up. Like, I very much want that to be the small legacy I can leave, that, hopefully people can say that I, will always try and, if I've got a job, I'll always try and get someone else to get a job. So I'll try and get a makeup artist that come in, or a content creator, even if there's no benefit to me, put them in touch with someone else. Like, I want people to make money, I want people to connect, and I'm happy to connect those people to just try and help, because I believe in pulling people up.
And we've got a few minutes left, so is there anything else we haven't discussed that you'd like to discuss? Anything that we haven't covered that you'd like to talk about?
Not really. I think we've done well.
Yeah. It's lovely seeing you today, Nadia. I'm sorry you were waterlogged where you are.
Yeah.
With all
Trapped
the flooding
by
and everything.
Rubbish trains. Oh, honestly. It's great living in the countryside, but that is the one thing. If you don't have a decent car that can drive through flooding, then you're not really going to get out your house on days like, when there's, I don't know what storm this is, but whatever storm this is, it's Storm Bert. Is it still Bert?
Yes,
I
it's
thought it
still
moved
Bert,
on to a
still
different
Bert.
person.
Have we gone to a different person? I thought it was still Bert.
Oh, I thought it was something like Helena or something.
Oh, I don't know. Maybe it's changed. I don't know.
Yeah, but it could be. Who knows? It's just one of those, isn't it, where it's like I can't keep up with it. But yeah, it's been it's a shame that I can't be there in person, but I'm with you in spirit.
And you'll have to get yourself a canoe for next time.
Yeah, right? Yeah, literally. Buy one of those James Bond cars that turns into boats.
Yeah, definitely. Anyway, it's lovely seeing you, Nadia, and thanks for
you.
doing this with me.
Of course, anytime.
Thank you.
Bye.
I've been Anne-Marie, and please like and subscribe. And I'll put all the links down for you as well, all the Instagram, Kidfluence, Fibroid, anything else you can think of.